This is Nan McKay. This is part of our Pivot and Soar series. We are interviewing trailblazers who have pivoted away from their former career to another venture by creating a business. Our guest today is Francoise Lyon. She is president and managing partner of DGC Capital, a boutique advisory firm based in Montreal, focusing on supporting and advising innovative tech founders, growth projects, family offices, and VC and PE funds looking to positively impact society. So, Francoise, take us on your pivot journey. What was your career prior to pivoting, and what business are you in now?
Well, I have a 30-year career as a wealth manager, and with a portion of that being capital markets. At the end of 2019, so we're talking pre-COVID, just as I was about to turn 50, I realized what I was dealing with in the wealth management industry and had for 30 years was not aligning with my own private values. I felt that it was very, I'm going to use the word savage in terms of capitalism. It was always to the advantage of the firm that I was working for. There wasn't much leeway to allow for impact. It seemed to be very much driven by profit, not so much the actual prosperity, which was a larger concept for me in sense of helping society, helping people in society. I'm all for profit. We need to make money to be able to reinvest, but I didn't believe in the construct that I was seeing in the type of industry that I was working in. So in December 2019, I decided to pivot away from a full-time job and took the risk of launching myself on my own with the intent of launching a VC fund. I had set aside 6 months of capital because I was at the point of actually having my first strategic investor. And I was supposed to close in June 2020. And then the pandemic hit in March. So that was a bit of a kink, which was not part of any of my plans. But in a way, it was probably a good thing because it really forced me to take a step back and think about really did I want to do a VC fund? Because it was following a very different angle, but in the same construct of what had been done in the past in the VC world. And that's led me down in the last year and a half to reinventing what VC meant for me and how I wanted to play that role within the industry.
So how are you helping women entrepreneurs?
I've always been very much inclined to be a mentor and a sponsor of women in general, not just entrepreneurs, but basically women in finance, women in business, women coming out of school, encouraging young women to stick it out in finance, because I think the financial industry is where the money is. Women who want to start business need to access that capital. And it's always been a big stumbling block, at least here in Canada, to actually get that funding, because most of the women who start businesses are more in the service industry, not so much in the technology industry, at least here in Canada. And it's not something that the traditional banking system or even VC world would support. They're looking for scale or scalability of a business. And if you're starting a small business in the service industry, obviously you're not looking to, increase the size to a $500 million business. But it really isn't through mentorship. I'm a very big believer in connecting people within a network. If I encounter a businesswoman who's looking for something specific, whether it's financing, whether it's help, whether it's somebody on their board, and then I make a huge effort to connect as easy as I can other women who are working whatever they're looking for. So mentorship, sponsorship, and in the role that I play, where I'm actually looking to invest in companies, I'm making an incredible effort to try and find women entrepreneurs that my team would come in and invest in to help that business. So I'm basically putting my money where my mouth is. I don't want to just be able to mentor, support, and sponsor. I'm hoping to actually be able to bring capital to the table to help these women entrepreneurs grow their businesses.
What advice would you have for someone thinking of quitting their job and starting a business?
Just do it. No. There's a few things. The first one, obviously, is we always underestimate the amount of money that we need to sort of get off the ground. I had assumed 6 months because I never thought there might be a pandemic. It was way too low. I probably, if I had to redo it again, would strongly recommend that you set aside the equivalent of 2 years of what you need to sustain yourself if you don't get off the ground with what you're trying to do, because it is going to cost a lot more than you think. And it's going to take probably a lot more time than you think, because there are always variables that you're not aware of. The second thing, which I knew because it had been recommended to me, is to build a really strong advisory board of people that you trust, of people that have gone through this process before, and use them as a sounding board, as you would if you were a company and you had a board of directors. Go to them when you need something that is strategic. So basically oversight in the sense of the approach from a governance point of view, foresight in the sense of a strategic, but also sometimes it's just to bounce ideas off. I would say make sure you're healthy, have that checkup, make sure that you know that you are going to be investing all hours of the day, 7 days a week. The whole concept of a weekend and a work week completely goes out the window when you decide to launch a business. You're either all in or you're all out. But I think most people don't realize how much work, time, efforts, energy, stress is involved. You probably can't achieve something like this, launching a business, if there's something in your life that is not optimal or as close to optimal as possible. So surround yourself with an advisory board, make sure you're in good health and that you're able to support the amount of time, stress that is needed to do this. And definitely, I would say, set aside more than you think you would need. If you're thinking X, I would multiply it by 2, if not by 4, to make sure that you have that buffer and that you're not stressing over the fact that the next payment might not be able to be made.
How did you make the financial transition? Did you have that much saved up?
I had put aside the equivalent of about 6 months, and I do have a spouse that is working full time that was able to sort of bridge the gap. I did not have 2 years. It's taken me 2.5 years to get where I am now. I ended up having to cash out part of what you would call in the United States your 401k. Here in Canada, we call it the RRSP. Thankfully, because I'm in the wealth management industry, I had started saving money when I was very young, when I started in the industry in my early 20s. So that was, a considerable amount by the time I had to sort of cash out part of it. And it was something I was willing to do because I strongly believe in my convictions. And I almost feel that if you're not willing to lay it all out, then you're not really cut out to be an entrepreneur. So I had that buffer. I also made sure that I had a lot of help. We don't have young children that are in diapers, but my daughter is a preteen. She's 13 years old, starting high school. I'm very fortunate to have a mother that is incredibly involved, that could come in and help when these Zoom calls started at 7 and sometimes finished at 10 o'clock at night. The rest of the life has to continue. And I did have a contract with my husband about picking up a little more about the household chores. And obviously that had to happen with the pandemic anyways. So, it kind of worked out well for that. But I was used to that need of support in that sense because I've been traveling extensively the last 10 years of my life. Sometimes I was gone 3 weeks out of 4. So I had to be incredibly well organized and have a lot of help to make sure that the other part of my life, the non-work part, was running, comfortably and smoothly.
What were some of the steps, kind of those first steps that you took to create your new business once you decided you wanted to do it?
I think I had to process and internalize what the risk of this would be. The comfort for 30 years of having a very well-paid full-time job and that security can be very destabilizing when you pull the plug. If I can use an analogy to go out on your own, when you're basically at a cliff and you're about to jump, and it's a bit of a free jump. You're hoping you're going to land on your 2 feet, but you're not too sure where that is going to be. But I have to admit, having dealt with the glass ceiling and the sticky floor, I found standing at the end of the cliff ready to do this free jump a lot more exhilarating and a lot less scary than bumping up against a glass ceiling, which I did in my industry, and basically getting stuck with my feet in a roll with a sticky floor, issue with women in finance and other businesses too. I had to work out in my mind what I was trying to accomplish, a lot more than saying yes to a job opportunity, because now suddenly everything was my responsibility. What I decided to do would reflect who I was. I was repositioning myself in the industry. People saw me as a corporate person. Now suddenly I was shifting over to an entrepreneur, which I had never done. So it was alleviating my fears. It was talking to a lot of people. It was initially putting that 6 months of money aside to be able to have that buffer. And then it was, I guess, a leap of faith. It was seeing the columns of, if I stay in this job, what do I get out of it? What do I not like? And if I do this, what do I get out? And that column on the right of choosing to become an entrepreneur was getting so long versus the other side. And I think when you're younger, you put up with a lot of things that you shouldn't, because you're scared that if you say something, you might lose your job or people might perceive you differently. When you hit your late 40s and early 50s, there's a shift that happens. It's a lot more about your legacy, the impact of what you're going to do on other people, and a lot less about other people's perceptions of what you're doing. And I think that freedom of being able to choose me and to choose how I wanted to contribute in a work way into society was very liberating. And the thrill, like I said, of being standing on that cliff to take that flight and almost know that some of the variables I didn't know I'd have to correct. I was going down and I'd have to pivot. I was ready. I'd lived enough at 30-year career, and I'd lived enough at 50 years on this earth to feel comfortable to take that leap, knowing that I didn't have all the answers, but I was comfortable enough and secure enough to pivot when it would be needed to pivot. And I could have crashed and burned, but somebody said very famously, it's better to have tried and failed than not to have tried at all. I can't remember who it was, and I really felt that I would never forgive myself if at this point I didn't try to do this versus sticking it out. I would have not forgiven myself for doing that.
How did you actually find your first customer?
Well, in my case, I wasn't looking for a really customer. I was looking for investment targets. And to do that, I was looking to launch a fund. So I was looking for investment companies that were interesting, alluring. I did have quite a few, but to do that, I needed to find funding for the actual VC fund. And I have to admit, that's where I hit my first roadblock. I left a very traditional capital market / wealth management industry with its, very structured boxes of how to do things. And then I jumped into, I guess, another construct of a venture capital fund, which was, I have to admit, a very male-dominated world and a very male-dominated view of what that means. And I was trying to wiggle my way out of this or change a little bit of that. I really wanted to attach the notion of impact. I did not want to come across as wanting to raise money to invest in a company to do like a 5x, 15x, 20x, and then off we went to the races, all made money and start all over again. I wanted to attach a portion of what we raised to foundations. I wanted to make sure that the companies I was investing in would actually not just return capital through profit, but would actually have to do good. Whatever that business was doing, whether it was a technology or some other process, that at the end of the investment, we were amplifying the good that company was doing in society or correcting an issue that needed to be corrected. And pre-pandemic, it was a little harder to talk about this. Now today, everybody's going, oh yeah, the aha moment happened. Like, we need impact. It's all very nice to make money, but if we're not helping or serving, people around us or improving something that is not working very well, what's the point? Somebody's making money and then they go off and do their own private thing. But, at the end of the day, we're not helping society. So I was a bit preaching to the unconverted, I guess, for the first part of 2019. Then throughout the pandemic, I realized that there was this shift in terms of people's mentalities of realizing that you have to take care of people. You have to take care of where we live. We have to take care of the planet. And, there is a way of making money, but at the same time, attaching a purpose to it. So we call it profit with purpose. We call it profit, which is conscientious in its creation. But to be able to do that, I had to drop the notion of a fund, because the fund demands that you convince other people to come in, believe your thesis, and then mandate you to go out and find companies to invest in. And the impact part was always falling because I was basically telling people that there was a probability that it might not be as profitable as a similar fund that doesn't have that impact part to it. But the end game of it, the impact part of it, would be so big in terms of helping some issue in society that it would be worth the risk. Actually, I've been disproven on that, because most impact funds that have been around for a long time are actually making as money, if not more, on top of doing good, but there's always been this perception that you're leaving something on the table if you're focusing on the impact part of it. So at the end, again, I had to pivot away from a traditional construct of a VC fund. And I have chosen to take the investors that believed in my thesis, and I'm going to be choosing the companies one by one. And I'm actually just finalizing the construct around one company here in Canada, where we're using crowdfunding in the United States, crowdfunding in Canada, and private investors. We're going to all sit them under a management agreement, and my team is going to come in and professionally manage that investment stake in the company and help grow that company. So instead of having this notion of a fund where I have a pool of money and then I can invest in several companies, I'm going to build a portfolio of individual companies that I'm going to wrap with investors around and individually manage them one by one, which has not ever really been done in my world here, at least in Eastern Canada. So I've kind of reinvented a little bit the model of a VC, because it allows me more flexibility to choose each company. And instead of having a pool of money that's very general, I now know where to go to find the investors that might be interested in company A versus company B, and not waste as much time trying to sell technology to one when in reality they want to clean up the waterways and they're looking for something very specific. So that was a very long-winded answer, but I feel very privileged to have managed to do that pivot within the pandemic while I was still pivoting out of my own corporate world, So I find myself pretty excited right now working on my first big investment. So it's not really a client I was looking for. It was an investment target. And then it was investors that believed in what this company was doing and were willing to move forward with me in this investment to make it happen.
I know a lot of startups are concerned about admin duties. If they get so bogged down in administrative duties, then there's a lot of other things that they ignore. Tell us a little bit about that when you started. Did you employ anyone within the first year? And then if so, how'd you find the right people? Or did you go more toward things like Upwork and Fiverr? How'd you do it?
I did not employ anything from an administrative point of view in the first year because I was kind of, I guess, working on the construct of what it would look like, what I was going to do. My plan is to not necessarily hire somebody full-time to do that work. Now that I'm at a point that I need that, I'm going to outsource it to a professional group that actually does that supportive work. They have a team, and for a fraction of a cost of what one person probably would cost for me to bring on, I'm able to have that sort of more multidisciplinary team that can support me for that. And it's the same thing I'm going to do for the back office administrative work of the investment. It's the same thing I did for the graphic design when I created my first deck to sell my concept. I mean, I went external for that. So because of the fact that I don't even have a physical office anymore, I got rid of that halfway through the pandemic. So I don't actually have a physical space. I think the idea of then hiring somebody right now, it didn't make sense in my thesis. I'd rather have access to these teams that bring some form of excellence and expertise in a very specific field, and then bring all these teams when I need them in. So I think for the next year or two, that's how I'm going to play it. I'm going to use external resources, but not in the sense of one person, in the sense of a professional and managed company that offers that service to me.
I think that's
I've done it all up to now. I'm a high functioning multitasker. So for now, but the fact that I wasn't traveling, there were no business development expenses. I mean, for now, I'm just managing my Zoom account. It wasn't that complicated. I have actually managed to get a team together, negotiate a management contract, negotiate the what we call the profitability split and all that, and find a company that we wanted to invest in. And none of us have ever met I've met my team because they're people I know here in Montreal, but my team and the company that we're investing in, plus all the lawyers, the accountants, none of us have actually met in person. We've actually completely broken the model and managed to get to a point where we're going to be raising close to $150 million to invest in this company in a completely virtual space. I'm telling everybody, because you can't tell on a Zoom, but I'm almost 6 foot tall. I said, you don't know what you're expecting. When I finally show up in person, I'm like 6'1". You're going to be shocked because, you expect, based on what you see on video, people to be what they are or how they are, but it's going to be quite interesting the first time that we can actually all meet in person. But we actually made it work. So I'm incredibly excited, and I'm suspecting that we're going to move forward with the first stake of our investment in this company, still not having met each other, because right now the plans are probably more in early 2022, and I'm wrapping up the first round of my investment in September. So that's quite unique. If you had asked me 3 years ago if I would have done this all online, managed to get to this point, and we're not talking $100,000 here, we're talking up to upwards of $150 million. It's quite exciting to see how it's all evolved. I feel like I'm at the beginning of something completely revolutionary and new, of finding a way to do venture capital in a different way, but at the same time doing it almost virtually, which is, it's quite something. It's quite novel.
Share with us maybe 3 of the most important lessons that you've learned doing this.
You mean pivoting away from a career and starting starting this business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think listening to your little voice, or whatever you want to call it, your gut feeling, or that tug that you get internally on a lot of things that don't seem right or maybe seem amazing. I think that comes with the confidence and wisdom of age, of listening to that little voice. I think I would strongly encourage people, if it's nagging you, and it has been for a long time, especially if it is about getting out of a traditional career and pivoting to something different, don't squash it. Let it breathe, give it time to elevate to another level. But I think the biggest mistake we can do is not listening to ourselves. And I think men are intuitive too, but I think women are highly intuitive, probably at another level. They're emotionally intuitive and spatially intuitive. I mean, just because of, I guess, the natural functions of what we've done through history. You can't, you have to listen to that. Number two, I can't tell people enough how important it is to have what I call my advisory board, to have that advisory board. Whether you decide to pivot out of your career, whether you decide to keep your career that as it is, I don't really care what it looks like, but to have a group of people that you can call on at any time, and you trust that they will be discreet with what you're discussing with them, and that they will give you, the right time at the right time. You don't want people that are going to, sugarcoat everything for you. You want people that are going to be authentic, sincere, and true about what you're asking them and the answer they're going to give to you, because that is your guiding light. It is your beacon. It's everything. And that is super, super important. I guess the third one comes back to the money thing. If you are about to do something like this and there is a risk that you will find yourself without a form of income, I can't stress enough the importance of making sure that you don't have to stress about this. If you don't put enough aside and you pivot into something that's more entrepreneurial, and then you find yourself not being able to pay the mortgage or pay for the milk or something, it'll distract everything. Do not put yourself in that position. Make sure that you have that covered, that somebody's there to cover you, but you cannot be distracted by that kind of stress, which is not being able to make the payments for your daily life, because it really does suck away the energy that you need to put into making your business successful. So I'd say the advisory board, listening to your gut feeling, and definitely making sure that you have the financial solidity to advance in this adventure of entrepreneurship.
What do you like best about your entrepreneurial lifestyle?
I'm the boss. The flexibility, the freedom, the flexibility of saying yes or no, the incredible capacity to align myself with people that have the same values of me and not being forced to do that because I'm working for somebody. It has happened in the past where I had to represent product categories or products in themselves that did not make sense to me, but that was my job. I was supposed to go out and, business develop them and raise money around selling them. That disconnect between what your beliefs are and then being pushed into a direction where you have to do something that does not align with your beliefs, it's incredibly damaging over time. I don't have to deal with that anymore. I love the fact that I can wake up in the morning and I don't have to deal with 2 hours of traffic anymore. And I don't have to travel every second week and lose luggage and not sure if my plane's going to take off. I've had the luxury of having supper with my family every night for a year and a half. That didn't even happen to me when I was a child. So definitely the freedom of saying yes or no, the flexibility of adapting my schedule to how I want it to be. I am not a morning person. I never have been a morning person. I worked in an industry that was very morning driven. If you're not at the office at 7:30, 7:15, there was something wrong with you. My brain wakes up around 10. Yeah, the markets have been open for an hour and a half or something, but my brain opens it doesn't matter what time I go to bed. I'm a night owl. I do my best work somewhere between 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night. Even at university, that was the best time for me to study. It's just my own biorhythm. So I've stopped fighting that. So the fact that I'm not fighting my biorhythm anymore, and that I'm allowing myself to be more productive in the times I feel where I'm at my peak, I'm less tired, I'm more sharp, I'm more creative. I mean, there's so many advantages. I don't even think about the downsides anymore. And you know what's happened, which is very particular, is I actually live in the moment. Up until this pivot, I was not focusing on the past, but I seemed to always be planning a trip 3 weeks, 3 months down the line. When I was supposedly in the moment, I was already thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, next week. That has completely gone away. I don't have time to think about tomorrow or next week or in 3 months. It's so intense what's going on day to day, but I love that because now I actually feel like I'm fully invested in the moment, and I'm not, my brain isn't halfway there or halfway here on something that's coming up in the future. And because I don't have to travel as much, I'm not in the fog of like time zones like it used to be. I don't deal very well with jet lag. In the last year before I went to Australia, and I'm pretty sure it took a month for my lugs to figure out where they were supposed to be my body after 2 30-hour flights in 6 days. I love traveling, and I will continue traveling for the pleasure and for work in the future. But I think the fact that I've been able to calm down, stay put, sleep more, and allow my body to work when it's optimal, it's a game changer for me. And I think all that put together, how could I ever go back to what it was before? Even if all this fails, I'm going to pivot again. find something which is within my, my taste or my pleasures and everything, and find a way to make that work, because I'm not, going back to a full-time job is not an option. It's not even on the short list. It's not on the long list. It's just not there anymore. This is it for me. And, I'm completely standing in my power and in the zone. That's the best way I can explain it.
Well, I absolutely have been entranced with so many things that you have talked about, because I think it's going to be so helpful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with people that are starting a business?
Yeah, don't let fear take over. It's important to be a little fearful. I think if you don't have that, you're not nervously energetic on the edge. If you have no fear whatsoever, there's something wrong. You should have done this a long time ago, I also believe that you have to be very authentic in how you are and what you do. If you're able to figure out what is super important to you from a values point of view, make sure that you align yourself with people that have the similar construct in terms of your values, because it can be the best project on earth. But if the person with whom you're doing it is not in the same zone as you in terms of why they're doing it and who they are as an individual, it's bound to fail completely. I guess something else I would like to say is think outside the box. It's not because, like in my case, I spent almost 30 years in wealth management. It would have been natural, I guess, to try and find a derivative of that. And that's perfectly fine if you want to reinvent something from where you come. But I wouldn't limit myself to that. Like, the box is as big as you want it to be. And the only constraints that are imposed are the ones that we impose on ourselves. I'm not saying like turn around and become a doctor if you've never gone to medical school. That's not what I mean. But if you're going to become an entrepreneur, the sky's the limit. There are so many things that need to be reinvented, so many things that need to be done better. I wouldn't want people to put themselves in a smaller box than they have to. And if it takes a little longer to figure out how big that box is, we'll take the time, to do that. One last thing, which is a little crazy for me, is I used to like walking, but I had never realized how cathartic walking can be. On top of being very good for you, you can pretty much do it everywhere. But I find it's one of the best meditative / problem solving / change the air kind of activity that I can do. And even if it's just 20 minutes a day in the morning or at the end of the day, I find I resolve a lot of the knots that show up during my day just by that little 20, 30-minute walk. Now, having said, I'm not saying don't go and do sports, but it is an easy thing to do, especially when you're stuck somewhere and the advisors are not available. Put on something, go out and do a little walk and come back. I think it really does make a difference. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say about, to people who are maybe on the edge of saying yes or no is what I said earlier. What's worse, having not done it and regretting it, or having tried and failed but then not regretting it? I'm of the nature that I'd rather try something and fail at it than regret not having tried ever. So it's an easy little thing, to remember. And I guess the last thing I'm going to say is, and this is probably for women in particular, mistakes are not fatal. You grow from mistakes. Learning how to deal with mistakes and bounce back from a mistake is a crucial lesson to learn, especially for women. A mistake is something that happens, and it is not reflected on who we are as an individual to have made a mistake. I often find that my girlfriends internalize mistakes in the way that it's a rejection of them instead of a failure of an idea or a project. And that is so important to untangle. And there is nothing wrong with mistakes. And if you never make mistakes, there's a growth part that'll never happen in who you are as a business person, as a person themselves. So I think the concept of mistake, we have to rethink it and stop seeing it as a total failure and look at it more as a growth opportunity. Obviously, if you're gonna go out and do a mistake, don't lose 20 million for your business in the first year. That's not what I mean by that. But I think we have to understand that mistakes are going to happen. Everybody makes them, and it's what you learn from it that is important, almost more so than the actual mistake that you made. Because unless something very dramatic happened, 99% of the time you will bounce back. You won't die from it, and you'll find later on, after you've actually analyzed it, that you're learning something very important from it, and it allows you to grow and to move forward probably in a better way.
Well, thank you so much, Francoise. It's just been great talking to you. Appreciate your time.
It's been a pleasure, Nan. Thank you for the opportunity. Very, very nice talking to you too.